On this edition of Bay Area Bountiful, we take a look at resilient agriculture. First, we'll learn about the lack of access to resources farmers of color continue to experience in the agricultural world, and why investing in these farmers makes our food system more resilient. Then we'll explore how in recent years, a new generation of gardeners are planting climate victory gardens to help address a new global challenge, climate change. It's all coming up next on Bay Area Bountiful.
Bay Area Bountiful is made possible in part by Rocky the free-range chicken and Rosie the original organic chicken. The Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, Made Local Magazine, and Sonoma County Go Local, and through the generous support of Sonoma Water. Cultivate, celebrate, connect.
When we talk about resilience in agriculture, we often talk about biodiversity. Growing many different types of plants and crops together makes a farming operation stronger. The same could be said of our entire food and agriculture system, in who is farming our food and how many people are growing food. Farmers of color in the United States, especially African American farmers, have historically experienced and continue to experience less access to land, resources, and information than white farmers have. And because many farmers of color hold generations of farming knowledge as well as use regenerative farming methods, putting them at the forefront of our food system is an investment in climate resiliency. Ultimately, when we have a greater diversity of people growing our food and more people growing their own food, our food system and our communities are stronger, more adaptable, and more resilient.
When you drive from here to maybe Los Angeles, you see acres and acres and acres of monocrops. And we all know the dangers of monocrops. Yeah, you can produce a lot of stuff, but all it takes is one pest to find that crop, and then the whole entire crop is gone. And I can tell you right now that my kale plants grow better when they're surrounded by other types of things, as opposed to just me having 2 or 3 rows of kale plants. We're here on a half an acre in South Oak Park, what they call, which is a food desert according to the USDA. And so right around 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession happened last time, I took to growing food in the backyard here, starting with maybe about 30 or 40 square feet. And in doing so, I just caught the bug of growing my own food, and not just the growing food part of it, but just being out in nature, connecting to nature, and really understanding the resiliency of the natural world. And so in looking at that, I realized that it was all about relationships. And so in this community, which is known as the hood or the ghetto, or depending on who you talk about, it is now being gentrified, I realized that the reason why you have neighborhoods where, we call it food desert, but I really think about it as food apartheid because of redlining, white supremacy, and all those different types of things. But at the end of the day, what the core thing of why these communities remain this way is because of a lack of relationships. Because it started out where I was here by myself. I started to bring my children out. We started to work out here. We started to eat together. We also started to cook together. And as a result, I realized that eating, growing your own food is a way of building community. And so with that, I was like, this is what we need to have in our community. So around 2011, my wife and I, Judith, we decided that we were going to take what we were doing on a small scale in our backyard and then go out into the community with this idea of a homegrown revolution.
I got into farming after working in the food industry for many years, so I think this is just a natural transition into, wondering where all this food I was preparing actually came from. Eating good food, I learned early on, makes people happy. I think I'm on a quest to make as many people happy as possible, and if I can do that through a good meal and I get to take care of their stomachs and hopefully help them have a better day by giving them something good to eat. So I don't know, I think I enjoy that part the most. I remember going with my mom to the grocery store, and I mean, we had grocery stores in town. I grew up in Compton in the late 80s and early 90s, and I mean, there's grocery stores there, but the quality of the produce wasn't the greatest, so we traveled 30 miles in LA is a long drive. Having a lower access to food and then going in the food industry, I really just figured it'd be like a good way to learn to eat and just teaching myself about what's healthy and what tastes good at the same time. I think I've been on a quest to figure that out, like what's healthy, what's good for you and good for the environment. I think breaking down barriers in the food and ag world is important. Because we have a tendency to think that there's only one way to grow vegetables, there's only one way to, one place to get them. And it's just access to the land is tied with that. We tend to have people of European descent, or the majority of the farmers in this country, yet, there's a variety of people who eat in this country from a variety of countries and backgrounds. And I think we tend to forget that. So it's important. I think once we have a bigger diversity of folks who are working the land and in ownership of the land, then we can open up that to other folks to grow food for themselves. Yeah.
At Farms to Grow, we started with the mission to support African American farmers, sprout the next generation of small farmers, and make sure that we had a story to tell. We wanted to address the prevalent and persistent gaps that we saw when it came to services and providing resources, information, and just going out and checking on farmers. We didn't see any of that, and so the organization started as a way to do something. It's a really precarious situation that Black farmers are in. No support to keep land, very little support to get land. And unless there's something really intentional, they will continue to lose land. And with losing land, they lose the legacy of the farming knowledge, local ecological knowledge that's very fragile.
For example, my great-grandfather was a farmer in Texas. And he was able to keep his land. He had to fight the KKK, had to keep a shotgun by his door, those types of things. But he had ancestral wisdom. Everything was organic back then. You took things from on your farm and you used those things to put back into your soil, and so that you could then grow something and come back. So there's deep ancestral wisdom with people of color that many people are still in trust of. And so when it's time for them to get on the land, that relates to climate change, because these methods, industrial farming, commercial farming methods, are the reason why we're destroying the earth. All we have to do, it's not like we have to do anything to change the climate, we just have to stop polluting. And once we stop polluting, the earth will clean itself up. It's a self-cleaning organism. And those types of voices, those types of ideas, models of farmers who are using ecologically sound methods and rivaling or even bettering the types of yields that these commercial farmers are getting, are the types of things that we need to have at the table. So it's not just one voice.
These are farmers that come from heritage, come from a whole generation of making sure that they take care of the land. And it's so important that these are the farmers that we keep farming. So they continue to do the farming that they've always been doing. What has been challenging is that they have had threats to their farming through racist and discriminatory practices that, push them to the edge. So it's not about them not figuring out how to deal with climate. It's really about them trying to figure out how to deal with folks trying to take their land, or folks trying to prevent them from having opportunities for growth. But left to their own devices and supported, Black farmers, as well as other traditional small-scale farmers, could do an incredible job of feeding us and taking care of the environment. And now is the time that we've got to make sure that we put them up front.
So the California Farmer Justice Collaborative, it formed as, I guess you could say, a germination of different farmers of color coming together and recognizing we've been left out of the prosperity in a place where at some point all of the food in the United States, or pretty much all the food in the United States, was being produced, i.e. the Central Valley, which we're part of. And so here we are 400 and some odd years later, since the beginning of maybe California as a state, and here we are still not being able to get resources, not knowing about the resources. And so the idea was, how can we get ourselves at the table and how can we get our voices heard? And so with that, we put together the Farmer Equity Act, right? Which really takes the same language that the USDA uses to talk about socially disadvantaged farmers. Now, the CDFA has appointed someone whose job it is to make sure that there are studies that are looked into to find out why is it that farmers of color up and down the state of California are not able to get access to the same resources.
I want to start a farm to bring others into farming. I mean, I definitely want to farm for myself, which is a long-time dream of mine, but I'm looking for a way to start new farmers and to engage them in agriculture. And hopefully, if there's enough space, I would love to open up access to other farmers, Black farmers, farmers of color who want to get into farming too. So that's my general plan and goal with the farm too. And just to help feed people. Again, like I said earlier, I like making people happy and like seeing their smiles when they're like, oh, that's what a tomato plant looks like, you know?
Finally, it's been so long. This thing got cut down. I thought it was gonna die. But it's made it. Perfect. Previous to this, I was in the IT field, networking specifically. And so when you think about a network, you can't have one single point of failure. So whenever we would put a system together, you would have a system, but then you'd have another system, and then you'd have another system, and then you'd have another system. That's called redundancy, right? So if one goes down, another one can pick up where that one failed, and then if that one fails, you have another one. That idea of having multiple places where multiple people are growing multiple things, that means that we're not just relying on one person for tomatoes. There might be, you might like the slicers, but then this person's good at the cherry tomatoes. And then you have the other person that's good with the heirloom tomatoes. So then you have those three people that can trade, barter their own tomatoes. But then don't forget, you've got the beans and you've got the amaranth and you've got the sunflowers. So then you have this distributed network of people that are all growing different things that can come together and start to share their crops, share their wisdom, share their knowledge, and then you even share their connections.
I am happy to say that I think we got this. I think we're going to be okay. You know, we've got young people of every persuasion that's coming into farming. You know, folks are opening their minds to, you know, the relationships that we can have with land. It doesn't have to be an owner. We can go back to the commons. We can go back to worker-owned co-ops. All these new ways in which communities are engaging with the land that they can grow their food. It is a brighter future today than I feel like it was 5 years ago. And so I hope that 5 years from now, it's even brighter.
I want to remain hopeful about the future of agriculture. I am actually. I'm such a cynic, but I am hopeful about the future of agriculture. I'm a cynic because it's challenging that it takes a lot of money to get started in agriculture. I'm hopeful that there's folks out there who want to help other people get started and lower those costs to get in the door to farming, and I think we'll be okay. Is that hopeful? That might be hopeful.
Citizens began planting victory gardens during the World Wars as part of national campaigns that encouraged resiliency and solidarity to win the war efforts. In recent years, a new generation of gardeners are planting climate victory gardens to help address a new global challenge, climate change. There has been a surge in interest in home gardening since the coronavirus pandemic began. We'll take a closer look at starting a climate victory garden and the potential benefits these gardens have to the environment.
More people seem to be planting gardens and growing their own food this year. I'm one of those first-time gardeners. Could gardens like mine change the world? Advocates of the Climate Victory Garden movement believe they can. My name is Sofia Englund, and I'm from Stockholm, Sweden. Birthplace of teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg and the Nobel Peace Prize. It won't be possible for me to visit Sweden for a while due to the coronavirus pandemic. Perhaps that's another reason planting roots in my adopted home in the San Francisco Bay Area feels important to me right now. There's something freeing about trying something out for the first time, something that you know nothing about. For some reason with the gardening, I just wanted to get my hands in the soil or in the dirt and learn by doing. And I think there's something freeing in that. So I planted a bunch of seeds, and of course they all germinated, and now we have all of this lettuce growing and all of this carrot. These little seedlings have sort of become like my little babies. So I check them every night and every morning. And it's obviously really exciting when you can see them grow. But this morning, when I woke up and I came out here, I saw this big mess here. And I was pretty upset. My suspicion is that it was a squirrel. We have this big walnut tree here. It's about 150 years old, and it's a great place to hang out if you're a squirrel. Some of the leaves, and especially this eggplant, it has these white little spots on it, and there's obviously a bug who's enjoying these leaves and eating. It's also eating in the pepper plant, and it's been eating on the basil. And so I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'm going to be consulting the experts to try to figure out what's going on. I've set up a video chat with Tony Pasentino, the Education Program Manager at the Sonoma Ecology Center. The center operates the Sonoma Garden Park, a city-owned public park and community garden. I'm hoping Tony can give me some gardening advice and teach me about victory gardens. So I came out one morning and checking on my plants as I do, and I noticed that an animal had been digging in the soil. And my theory is that it was a squirrel. We have some squirrels here that love the walnut tree. What can you do if you have squirrels digging in your soil and sort of disrupting the plants?
We live amongst the squirrels, we have to coexist with them. The old method that's been proven is actually cayenne or red chili powder, dried powder. If you can dust a light amount on your topsoil near where they were scavenging, it's been known to deter them. They're not into the spicy foods.
That's great. I'll try that. So
Yeah.
what is it that they're doing when they're digging?
They might be planting that walnut nearby you for a little bit of a winter forage.
They were squirreling it away.
That's right.
That's what I was thinking. Something is eating away at my plants. Do you have some ideas what that might be?
Common one that we find in a lot of gardens are what's called the cabbage lopper. And it's a small green caterpillar-like larva that finds its way into a lot of garden crops. And the easiest solution for that is really to be observant and to manually pick them off and maybe feed a bird or an animal nearby with it.
What is the Victory Garden and what is the history of the Victory Garden?
The Victory Garden concept originated around the time of World War I. It picked up even more steam in World War II. Some estimates are saying that about 20 million gardens were planted in 1942 alone.
On this farm in the rolling hill country of northern Maryland, the Holters, rallying to the call for more food, joined the growing army of Victory gardeners.
In addition to the gardens being a way to help support the troops, it was also a morale boost. To be able to have a duty and a role gave people more purpose and a direction of how to provide their support. One of the main people that really deemed it a victory garden was actually one of the leading agricultural scientists of the 20th century, George Washington Carver. And George Washington Carver released a pamphlet that was called Nature's Garden for Victory and Peace. And personally, I think we should probably start to change the name that we're offering of this modern day victory gardens. That one has a better zing to it. I like that it's not just war, but it's also nature and peace.
How can that feeling that you have purpose and you're contributing to a greater cause, how does that translate now in the time that we live in?
These modern day climate gardens have been around and actually surged with the recent shelter-in-place mandate. People connecting back with the land is really important right now. Agricultural production is a huge contributor of our greenhouse gas emissions. Up to 20 to 30% of our emissions of individuals is contributed through our food consumption, our food systems. Sourcing locally, buying locally, we're all pretty familiar with now. What it also does is bring awareness to individuals about climate change. Being very aware of the natural cycles makes us aware of how climate change is impacting them.
Tony said that cultivating healthy soil will benefit my garden and the environment. I'm planting ground cover and using compost to help my soil along. Tony mentioned that planting marigold flowers in your bed can help to repel insects that could harm plants. Before planting, I decided to consult with the owners of the Living Seed Company, founded in Point Reyes Station. Astrid and Matthew Hoffman's shared interest in seeds, gardening, and environmental advocacy brought the couple together. As a first-time gardener and seed saver, I could certainly use some advice and inspiration from them. It seemed to be going well at first, and then it sort of went too well because I think I planted too many seeds too close together, so it sort of became a little bit crowded. My mentality was sort of like, the more I put in there, the better, and I'll have maybe some of them won't germinate, and then they all did.
Right, that's a good thing.
I'm from Sweden, and growing things there is just so much more difficult than here, so I don't think I realized that it's just really good conditions for growing vegetables here, and they were just really happy.
Overcrowding could be detrimental, obviously, to the seeds because what happens is the plants start competing for water and nutrients and space. Ultimately, understanding what each variety needs, the amount of space that they're going to need once they become mature, because initially your garden might look a little spindly because there's like one little plant here and a little plant there, but those plants need that amount of space to fully grow out.
There are some benefits to sourcing your seeds from a local company, right? So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Seeds are living, breathing embryos, and they acclimate to the particular soil, particular climate, and they're constantly scanning their environment to adapt. And it's amazing how when you source seed from a local company based in your area, those seeds are naturally more acclimated to your particular area. And then once you plant those seeds, and if you decide to save those seeds become even more acclimated to your specific garden.
Could there be a connection between gardening and world peace? I'm curious to find out more about Matthew's work on the giant peace dove puppet movement, a collaboration with UN Messenger of Peace, Dr. Jane Goodall.
We had people all over the world in over 80 countries building and flying these peace dove puppets, from the tops of Mount Kilimanjaro to the jungles in Ecuador, Hutus and Tutsis in Congolese refugee camps, Israeli and Palestinian youth, and then we flew them at the United Nations with Kofi Annan and his wife. Muhammad Ali was there for the first giant peace dove flight. They've been flying at the United Nations General Assembly ever since.
That's a really interesting way to communicate to people a message that might sometimes feel very big. You can sort of reach people in a way that really resonates with them on a deeper level.
And I think the same with food. People might not agree on a lot of things, but food is a thing that a lot of people who have a lot of different ideas can agree on. Good food is good food. Sharing food is important across the world.
We've talked about world peace. What about getting some inner peace from gardening, and what's your experience with that?
One of my most favorite things to do is to plant a seed, water it, and within a few days see it sprout out. It's a miracle. It's something that's beyond explanation. And then you get to tend it over months and watch it develop and grow, and then it nourishes you in the end. Or you're just sitting still in your garden when things are in bloom and just listening to the wind blow through the plants and catching a fragrance from some flowers that you've planted. There are all these elements that I think naturally soothe people's minds and hearts. We think every year is a good year for people to have gardens, but this year might be an especially good one.
I hope I will be gardening for many years. When I'm working with my hands in the earth, I don't feel so far away from Sweden. I feel connected to the world beyond.
Diversity in many forms keeps our world stronger and more resilient. Biodiversity in what we grow for our food, diversity in the methods we use to grow that food, and diversity in the people who grow that food. It means making sure that all farmers have a seat at the table, and it also means encouraging more people to grow their own food. It takes all of us to create a resilient food system together.